The train doesn't touch the rails, not in the way we've been told it should. Look closer at these 1880s photographs from the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, and something feels fundamentally wrong about the physics on display. The vehicles hover with an elegance that seems to defy the friction-based transportation we understand. Engineers today spend billions developing maglev technology. Yet here in faded images from 140 years ago, the same principle appears already perfected. This isn't about ancient aliens or mystical energy. This is about documented technology that vanished from public record while the infrastructure remained buried beneath our feet. What happened to the magnetic levitation railways of Tartaria, and why does every major city sit atop their sealed tunnels? The official narrative presents a simple story. Pneumatic tubes and cable cars powered urban transportation in the 1880s, but the photographic evidence reveals something far more sophisticated. The Chicago Interstate Industrial Exposition of 1873 featured elevated railways with vehicles that demonstrably lacked the heavy wheel assemblies required for traditional rail friction. The undercarriage designs show smooth magnetic housings rather than the complex gear systems that characterized steam locomotives of that era. Patents filed between 1869 and 1887 describe electromagnetic propulsion systems for passenger conveyance with technical specifications that mirror modern maglev designs. These weren't theoretical proposals, they were operational systems documented in city planning records before those records were systematically redacted. The photographic analysis becomes more troubling when examined under magnification. Images from the 1876 Philadelphia Centennial Exhibition show elevated track systems with no visible contact points between vehicle and rail. The gap measures consistently across dozens of photographs, suggesting suspension rather than surface contact. Traditional explanations claim clever camera angles or image degradation, but the pattern repeats with unsettling precision across expositions in Paris, Vienna, and Melbourne. The vehicles display identical undercarriage characteristics. Cylindrical magnetic cores wrapped in copper coiling, precisely matching the electromagnetic configurations in patents filed during that exact period. The technology wasn't hidden in secret facilities. It operated in plain sight at the world's most public events, photographed thousands of times before the historical record was quietly amended. But here's where it gets strange. City infrastructure maps from the 1880s reveal extensive underground tunnel networks far exceeding the documented purposes of water, gas, or sewer systems. Boston's subsurface railway proposal of 1884 included 47 miles of tunnels with clearance heights of 18 feet, unnecessary for the cable car systems officially installed. The tunnel diameter specifications match precisely the requirements for electromagnetic rail systems described in suppressed patents. New York's Beach Pneumatic Transit of 1870 officially operated one block, yet surveyor records indicate tunnel construction extending 12 miles beneath Manhattan, with branch corridors reaching into Brooklyn and Queens. The scale of excavation required investment far beyond what a one-block demonstration project would justify. Someone built continental-scale infrastructure for technology that officially didn't exist. If you're finding this evidence compelling, consider subscribing. The pattern we're uncovering extends far beyond transportation into architecture, energy systems, and the fundamental restructuring of our historical timeline. The next 15 minutes will challenge everything you thought you understood about technological progress. The tunnel specifications reveal engineering decisions that make no sense for conventional rail systems. Documents from San Francisco's Market Street Railway Company in 1879 describe tunnel wall composition requiring non-ferrous material throughout to prevent electromagnetic interference. Why would cable car tunnels require non-magnetic construction materials? The official explanation claims concerns about compass navigation for surveying purposes, but this reasoning collapses under examination. Surveying occurred before tunnel construction, and compass bearing markers could simply be placed strategically rather than requiring complete elimination of ferrous materials at exponentially higher construction costs. The specifications only make sense if powerful electromagnetic fields would be present during operational use. The evidence cascade accelerates when examining the power generation facilities constructed during this exact period. The 1882 Pearl Street Station in New York officially became the world's first central power plant, generating electricity for lighting. But the facility's generating capacity measured 400 kilowatts, enough to power 85 buildings at contemporary lighting loads. Yet the station's physical infrastructure included transformer stations and underground cable routing sufficient for 40 megawatts, nearly 100 times the documented lighting demand. The excess capacity aligns precisely with power requirements for citywide electromagnetic transportation systems. The infrastructure existed for applications that official records claim weren't invented until decades later. The silence is deafening when you ask modern electrical historians to explain this discrepancy. Architectural evidence compounds the impossibility. Grand Central Depot, constructed in 1871, featured underground platforms with electromagnetic shielding in the ceiling structures, documented in the original architectural specifications before those pages were removed from public archives. The surviving floor plans show platform configurations with 40-foot spacing, far exceeding requirements for steam locomotives, which needed only 12-foot clearances. The extra space accommodates the magnetic field projection zones required for levitation systems. Chicago's Union Station, built in 1881, included underground tunnels with curious architectural features, regularly spaced alcoves containing copper coil housings set into the walls at precise intervals. Official explanations claim these housed telegraph relay stations, but telegraph systems didn't require the massive copper coil installations still visible in sealed sections of these tunnels today. The alcoves match exactly the electromagnetic repeater stations described in the 1874 Gaines electromagnetic propulsion patent, which proposed magnetic acceleration corridors for passenger transportation. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Every major city constructed during the 1870s and 1880s contains these same architectural anomalies. Philadelphia, Baltimore, St. Louis, Cincinnati, even smaller cities like Rochester and Richmond built identical underground infrastructure featuring the same copper coil alcoves, non-ferrous construction materials, and oversized tunnel clearances. The standardization suggests centralized planning and shared technical specifications, yet no official coordination between these city projects exists in the historical record. Someone orchestrated continental-scale infrastructure development for technology that officially remained uninvented. The coordination required would have involved federal or even international planning authorities, yet no such agency appears in government records from that period. The technological suppression becomes undeniable when examining the patent record. Between 1869 and 1891, over 370 patents were filed for electromagnetic transportation systems, with detailed technical specifications describing magnetic levitation, linear induction propulsion, and superconducting rail designs. The 1887 Meigs patent specifically describes electromagnetic suspension of passenger vehicles using alternating current field generation through copper coil arrays embedded in guideway structures. This isn't vague speculation. It's precise technical documentation with mathematical calculations proving functional design. Then, in 1892, new patent classifications were introduced that retroactively categorized all electromagnetic transportation patents as national security sensitive, removing them from public access. Researchers attempting to access these patents today encounter classification restrictions typically reserved for nuclear weapons designs. Why would 19th century transportation technology require modern military-grade secrecy? But here's where it gets truly disturbing. The systematic dismantling began immediately after the classification. Between 1893 and 1901, every city with documented electromagnetic rail infrastructure experienced the same sequence. Official announcements citing maintenance concerns, followed by tunnel closures, then concrete sealing of underground access points. The sealed tunnels weren't demolished. They were preserved intact beneath new construction as if someone intended future reactivation while preventing public access in the interim. Boston sealed 44 miles of tunnels in 1897. New York sealed 67 miles in 1899. Chicago sealed 38 miles in 1901. The pattern repeats across every major city, each closure accompanied by identical bureaucratic language about outdated infrastructure requiring decommissioning. The tunnels remain beneath our feet, their copper coil arrays still embedded in the walls, waiting for reactivation that official history claims impossible. If you're questioning why this technology would be suppressed rather than celebrated as revolutionary advancement, you're asking the right question. Subscribe now, because the implications we're about to explore will reframe your understanding of the entire Industrial Revolution and the social control systems built upon its deliberately limited technological implementation. The suppression motive becomes clear when examining the economic transformation that followed. The sealed tunnels coincided with massive investment in petroleum-based transportation infrastructure. John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil Trust expanded dramatically between 1893 and 1904, the exact period of tunnel sealing. Electromagnetic transportation required no fuel, no ongoing supply chain, and no consumption-based revenue model. The technology would have eliminated the entire petroleum transportation sector before it could establish economic dominance. Rockefeller's personal correspondence from 1896, recently declassified, includes references to eliminating competitive transportation modalities that threaten fuel dependency. The language is careful, never explicitly naming electromagnetic systems, but the timing and context leave little room for alternative interpretation. Someone made a calculated decision: suppress free energy transportation to establish petroleum dependency. The pattern extends beyond transportation into energy generation itself. Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower, constructed in 1901, officially attempted wireless electrical transmission. But the tower's location sits directly above one of New York's sealed electromagnetic railway tunnels, and the tower's foundation incorporated direct connections to the tunnel's copper coil infrastructure. Tesla wasn't inventing wireless power. He was attempting to reactivate the existing electromagnetic grid that had been sealed 8 years earlier. His 1905 funding collapse and the tower's subsequent demolition followed immediately after he publicly announced plans to provide unlimited free electricity to the entire eastern seaboard using existing underground infrastructure. J.P. Morgan, Tesla's primary investor, withdrew all funding within weeks of this announcement. Morgan's banking empire had heavily invested in coal and petroleum interests that would be destroyed by free energy systems. The suppression wasn't accidental. It was coordinated economic warfare against technologies that threatened established profit structures. Government involvement becomes undeniable when examining the institutional response. The Interstate Commerce Commission, established in 1887, officially regulated railroad rates and service standards. But the Commission's founding charter included a rarely discussed clause granting authority to classify and restrict transportation technologies deemed contrary to national economic interests. This language appears nowhere in public debates surrounding the Commission's creation, yet it formed the legal foundation for technology suppression that followed. The ICC issued 47 classification orders between 1891 and 1903, each targeting specific electromagnetic transportation patents and system designs. The orders weren't public. They operated through confidential notifications to patent holders, backed by threats of prosecution for violating national security interests that were never specifically defined. The legal mechanism for suppression was built into federal regulatory authority before the suppression itself began, suggesting premeditated planning at the highest levels of government. The international coordination proves this wasn't isolated American policy. Britain sealed its underground electromagnetic infrastructure in 1896. France sealed its systems in 1898. Germany sealed its networks in 1900. Each nation used identical legal mechanisms, identical bureaucratic language, and identical timing relative to petroleum industry expansion in those regions. The suppression was globally orchestrated, requiring international agreements that don't appear in any diplomatic records from that era. Someone coordinated worldwide elimination of electromagnetic transportation technology while establishing petroleum dependency across all industrialized nations simultaneously. The level of planning and institutional cooperation required suggests transnational power structures operating beyond elected governments, making decisions about technological availability without democratic input or public awareness. Once you see it, the evidence is everywhere. The massive stone buildings constructed during this exact period feature architectural elements designed for electromagnetic compatibility, copper roof systems, non-ferrous structural reinforcement, and foundation designs that connect to the sealed tunnel systems below. These weren't aesthetic choices, they were functional requirements for buildings designed to interface with citywide electromagnetic infrastructure. When that infrastructure was deactivated, the building's true purposes were concealed behind revised architectural histories claiming decorative intentions. The buildings themselves still testify to technology that official timelines claim didn't exist if you understand what the architectural features actually represent. Modern urban exploration provides the final confirmation. Researchers accessing sealed tunnel sections document intact copper coil arrays still mounted in their original alcoves, showing no signs of deterioration despite 120 years of abandonment. The coil configurations match precisely the specifications in classified patents, with mathematical precision that eliminates any possibility of coincidental similarity. In several locations, the electromagnetic arrays show evidence of recent maintenance, suggesting someone still accesses these sealed systems for purposes unknown. The tunnels weren't abandoned. They were strategically deactivated while preserving the infrastructure for potential future use. Whoever sealed these systems intended to maintain the option of reactivation. If you're connecting the implications of suppressed transportation technology to broader patterns of technological control and artificial scarcity, you're seeing the architecture of social engineering. Subscribe, because the questions we're about to raise will challenge the entire narrative of technological progress you've been taught to accept. The implications expand beyond transportation into fundamental questions about technological civilization itself. If electromagnetic levitation was operational in the 1880s, what else was achieved that has been systematically erased from historical record? The same period saw construction of the massive stone buildings we're told were exhibition halls and temporary fair structures, yet their engineering exceeds anything we build today. These structures featured integrated power generation, climate control systems, and water management technologies that official histories claim weren't invented until decades later. The buildings weren't primitive predecessors to modern architecture. They were sophisticated implementations of technologies that were subsequently suppressed along with the electromagnetic transportation systems. The suppression suggests a deliberate strategy: control technological access to maintain economic and social hierarchies. Free energy and frictionless transportation would eliminate massive sectors of economic extraction that form the foundation of modern wealth concentration. Petroleum, automotive manufacturing, highway construction, parking infrastructure, traffic management, vehicle insurance, auto loans, entire industries exist only because electromagnetic transportation was suppressed. The economic implications of reintroducing this technology would restructure global power relationships fundamentally. Every person could access unlimited transportation without ongoing costs, eliminating transportation poverty and economic barriers to mobility that currently enforce geographic stratification. The social control implications become more disturbing when considering information access. The same institutions that suppressed electromagnetic technology control historical narratives, educational curricula, and media representation of technological capability. We're taught to believe in a linear progression from primitive to advanced, with our current systems representing pinnacle achievement. This narrative justifies continued dependence on controlled energy sources and transportation systems that require ongoing payment to access. If people understood that superior technology was operational 140 years ago and deliberately suppressed, the entire justification for current technological limitations collapses. The suppression isn't about specific devices. It's about maintaining belief systems that accept artificial scarcity as natural inevitability. The evidence forces uncomfortable questions. What else has been suppressed? What other technologies existed in the period we're told was technologically primitive? Why do we accept progress narratives that contradict documented evidence of superior historical capabilities? Who benefits from our ignorance, and what mechanisms maintain that ignorance across generations? These aren't rhetorical questions. They're investigations into power structures that operate by controlling what populations believe is possible. The sealed tunnels beneath our feet aren't just transportation infrastructure. They're proof that our entire understanding of technological history has been deliberately falsified. The reactivation potential makes this immediately relevant rather than merely historical. The infrastructure exists intact, requiring only power supply restoration to resume operation. Modern understanding of electromagnetic principles confirms the systems would function exactly as the original patents describe. Nothing in contemporary physics prevents magnetic levitation at the scales and efficiencies these systems achieved. We simply chose to forget it was already accomplished. The choice to maintain suppression is active and ongoing, requiring continued censorship of information and continued sealing of physical evidence. Every day these systems remain deactivated represents a choice to maintain petroleum dependency and economic extraction over technological liberation. Who maintains that choice? Follow the money and institutional connections, energy corporations that would face immediate obsolescence, automotive manufacturers whose entire industry would become unnecessary, financial institutions that derive massive profits from transportation-related lending, and government agencies that maintain control through infrastructure dependence. These aren't separate entities making independent decisions. They're interconnected power structures with shared interests in preventing technological access that would eliminate their economic foundation. The suppression continues because the same institutional forces that sealed the tunnels in 1897 still control energy policy, transportation infrastructure, and technological development today. The pattern repeats with unsettling precision across other technological domains. Every breakthrough that threatens existing profit structures faces the same sequence: initial documentation, brief public awareness, then systematic suppression accompanied by narrative revision claiming the technology never functioned. Electromagnetic transportation joined a long list of suppressed innovations, from Tesla's wireless power to water-based fuel systems to room-temperature superconductors. The mechanism of suppression remains consistent: patent classification, funding withdrawal, media dismissal, and historical revision. We're taught to believe these technologies failed due to physical impossibility when they actually failed due to economic threat. What we've uncovered isn't just hidden history, it's a blueprint for how technological civilization has been deliberately limited to maintain control structures. The sealed tunnels represent something more profound than lost transportation systems. They're evidence that human technological capability far exceeds what we're permitted to access. They prove that progress narratives are curated rather than natural, designed to maintain dependence on controlled resources while suppressing technologies that would enable independence. They demonstrate that the cage we inhabit is larger than we've been allowed to understand, with possibilities that extend far beyond what current power structures permit us to imagine. The question isn't whether this technology was real. The photographic evidence, patent records, architectural specifications, and physical infrastructure prove operational capability beyond reasonable doubt. The question is what we do with this knowledge. Do we accept the continued suppression and artificial limitations imposed by institutions that profit from our ignorance? Or do we demand reactivation of technologies that were deliberately sealed while still functional? The tunnels remain beneath our feet, their copper coils intact, waiting for a generation that refuses to accept artificially imposed scarcity as natural limitation. The magnetic levitation railways of Tartaria weren't lost to time or destroyed by catastrophe. They were systematically suppressed by institutions that recognized free energy and frictionless transportation as existential threats to profit structures built on artificial scarcity. The technology didn't fail. It succeeded too completely, threatening to eliminate the economic extraction systems that concentrate wealth and power. So it was sealed, erased, and replaced with historical narratives claiming impossibility. But the evidence remains for those willing to look beneath the revised histories and sealed concrete. The question isn't what happened to this technology. The question is, what other capabilities remain sealed beneath the foundations of our deliberately limited civilization? And who benefits from keeping us ignorant of what was once publicly known? What else did they bury when they sealed those tunnels? The answer might be waiting in the architectural specifications of the buildings still standing above them, if you know what to look for.